Hey, hey, hey. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Work Should Feel Good, the show where your career growth meets your real life. I'm your host, Diana Alt, and today my guest, David Hannan, and I are going to dig into how job seekers with ADHD can change up their approaches to work with their unique brains. David and I have known each other for several years on LinkedIn. He's the owner of Pathfinder Coaching, where he coaches mid-career professionals with ADHD to build clarity, confidence, and job search strategy in a way that works for their brain, not against it. He's originally from the UK, and David's path was definitely not linear. After struggling in school, he joined the Royal Air Force at age 20 and later built a successful recruiting career. Then finally was diagnosed with ADHD in 2024, a moment that changed everything and put him on a mission to help others navigate a job market that often ignores how their brains think and work. Welcome to the show, David.
Hey, Diana. So
Hey,
happy to be here.
I am
So happy
so
to be here.
happy. I got to tell you what, when I decided to do the show, which I decided in January I was going to do it and that I was just going to it's not even on Libsyn yet. I decided to start it as a live stream so that I would just take action because I have a sash that says overthinker for good reason behind me. So I wanted to make sure I didn't overthink it. And I
Yeah.
started brainstorming people that I wanted on the show. And you were one of the first 5 people that I wrote down because I think this whole right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Aren't you? So
So
cool.
yeah, look, it feels nice every time I hear that. So yeah, thank you. That's super
Yeah,
generous of you.
well, it's I think I have had I am not ADHD, which is funny because people try to tell me I'm in denial. They're like, "You're an entrepreneur, like, how are you not
It's the worst
ADHD?"
thing. Yeah.
But I don't have ADHD, but I've had a number of clients over the years that have ADHD, and I
Yeah.
want to learn more about it. So I want to dig back into early, like way before you knew that you had ADHD, though. What in the world was it like to be in the Royal Air Force
Oh
with
God.
ADHD when you were 20 and you didn't even know that was going on? Like, how did you feel about that? Did you ever feel like you were out of step with the rest of the people? Discuss that a bit for us.
Pun intended. Out of step. Um,
Not pun intended. Whatever.
it's I don't know. It's there's a little story that I tell. Well, first of all, hello everybody. Thanks for the intro, Diana. Um, it's a great question. So I tell a little story when I speak to prospective clients for the first time. Like, one of the questions I asked them was like, "What did you want to be when you grow up?" And I let them kind of think about it, and I give them a bit of context in terms of my background. So when I was a kid, my mum took my brother and I to a local air show. Like, you guys have got the Blue Angels here in the US. We have the Red Arrows, and we'd go and see this, aerial display, and we'd go every year, and I'd like just marvel at like the military,
Yeah.
specifically Air Force, and I'd like hang out around the planes, and I'd sit in the cockpits, and my entire childhood, I'd convinced myself that I want to fly planes. Got to fly planes. Um, Undiagnosed, untreated ADHD as a kid. Again, I'm no expert on this. I'm not an ADHD. I'm not a doctor. I'm still trying to figure out my own kind of future path. So I just want to kind of caveat by saying that. But I'd always convinced myself that I want to fly planes. And then, fast forward to 52 years old, which I turned last year, got my diagnosis in August. And my psych and I were talking about my career. We got into the military, and I told her what I thought. And she said, "What if it wasn't you wanted to be a pilot? What if it was a lack of order and structure and discipline that your brain craved for because you had undiagnosed and untreated ADHD? And you'd
Yeah.
been exposed to that kind of element of structure, order, routine, discipline with the RAF, which is the Royal Air Force." And I was like, "Oh my God, yeah, maybe." So I enjoyed it, Diana. I think naively, I joined the military to see the world, like a lot of folks do. My father-in-law is a Vietnam vet, World War II veteran, a Vietnam vet, sorry. And it's I thought I wanted to see the world, and I didn't. I spent 4.5 years on the same airbase in southern England. I got bored pretty quickly. Shocker.
Wow.
So yeah. It was fun. I think I look back and like I think my most enjoyable part was basic training, to be honest. Like just 42 days of 5 a.m. mornings and brutality through like 11 p.m. and constant cleaning and constant, ironing shirts and stuff like that. So I loved the camaraderie of it all, and I really did like the rules and regulations
It
and
gave you a
structure.
container to be in. My brother has autism, and I
Mm,
remember from that, he's 5 years younger than me. And I remember
mhm.
from the time that I was very small, my mom explaining to me that routine was really important for Philip. And we didn't have
Yeah.
like the strongest routine in our family. Like my dad was a farmer and a teacher, which means he was gone a
Wow.
lot. And my
Yeah.
mom was wrangling 3 children, all 3 of which were, like, somehow neurospicy. Because my older
Hmm.
brother and I were gifted, my younger brother has autism, like, it was my bless my mother, you know? But
Yeah.
any kind of structure that we could put around, my younger brother was
Mhm.
helpful.
Yeah.
So, I'm not
Yeah.
surprised that that was helpful to
I
you.
enjoy I enjoyed that part tremendously. Yeah. Thanks for taking me back. That's 33 years now. Yeah.
It is a minute, isn't it?
Hmm. It is a minute.
One thing, like, just me observing you, like, we've been friends on LinkedIn for a while, but it's
A
like
long time.
the DM and comment kind of friends. Every time we try to get, like, on a Zoom like this we're doing today, like, it didn't work out or everybody was busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
great to actually talk like this to you.
Oh yeah.
One thing I did notice though, when you announced finally that you had ADHD, like some things clicked for me because I watched you as a coach go through a few niches, which on one
Hmm.
hand was cool because you were experimenting and discarding and experimenting and discarding. And what was
Yeah.
behind that? Because you went through a few different things. Was that really more, was it more about the experimentation or was it about you would get bored? Like, tell me about that. You're wandering through a few coaching niches.
Another great question.
I'm very
Yes to a little bit of
curious.
boredom. Look, I didn't fall into I fell into recruiting, so I have a recruiting background, as you know, and as your
Yeah.
viewers know. And I was in recruiting in New York City for about 14 years, 2 in the UK, and then corporate recruiting before that. So I came from a recruiting background, but fell into the agency world here in New York City, and then moving into coaching felt it was one of 3 options that I was kind of toying with back in 2018, 2019. And 2020 hit, COVID. I had my own agency at the time. I launched my own staffing firm, doing pretty well. COVID hit. That ground to a halt in about 3, 4 months. So I was like, what next?
Mhm.
Um, and I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to go back to the agency world or recruiting in general. It just wasn't really for me. It felt pretty transactional. Um, and I had a mentor, and we talked like my prospective clients talk. Like, what one of the biggest questions I remember deeply is, what's the one thing that you've loved about your career so far that you'd miss if you couldn't have it in your next job? And I was like, immediately, working with candidates.
Mm.
Long story short, moved into coaching. So yeah, so these, like, when I jumped in, I kind of fell into the crowd. Diana, you know what it's like. You've been doing this longer than me. So my feed was full of everybody winning, nobody failing, everybody doing great, everybody making 6 figures. And I jumped onto that moving train and realized that
Wise.
it wasn't my train. Yeah, it was going to a destination that I got bored with pretty quickly. I found, on just from a business perspective, I found that I was competing on price versus competing on value. And I learned that mistake pretty quickly. So I pivoted a couple times trying to find my own differentiation. Like, how can I be different? And I kind of leaned into the recruiter, like my past recruiting experience ultimately. And it felt better. And then the whole ADHD thing just manifested organically because I actually, just to be really honest with you, I got asked this a few days back, like, what was the catalyst for me? Why did I go and seek an assessment? And I have a almost 5-year-old daughter, and becoming a parent is stressful anyway. And any parents watching, you'll just be nodding your head. It's just a different kind of pressure. But I would start out of nowhere, and I'd never been this way before, snapping, like, just not
Mm.
out, not red mist type outbursts, but
Yeah.
really short. And it got to the point when I said something like backhanded to my daughter. At the time, she was, 4. She didn't know any better. And I looked at my wife and I said, this isn't right. I don't feel good. Because I would spiral so hard with regret after, like, immediately I spiraled. I'm like, what am I doing? So I reached out to my GP and he said, well, you have some questions. And I said, look, I have some friends, I have some, members of family who are going through an assessment. Is it worth me going to an ADHD specialist, or at least talking about an assessment? August, I got my diagnosis, ADHD, primarily inattentive type. So I was never really bouncing off the walls at school. No one really caught it. So tough, right? Tough living with something that I just thought that was my normal, Diana. So learning, less than a year ago that normal, and I don't even know if that's an appropriate word to use now.
It was your
It's been a
normal.
whole new me.
I'm gonna go with it was your.
Everybody has their version of normal, right?
Yeah.
But the diagnosis and treatment that I feel really lucky to have access to has been eye-opening
Can we
every time.
wander into the assessment? Because I have had several clients that are about our age. I'm 50, so we're just a couple of years apart. And
You're still younger than me, Diana.
I know it's how it works, but that's okay. We're both wise. Our age starts with a 5. That's what comes with it.
Okay.
But where
I'll
I
take
was
your word for it.
I've run across a few clients around your age that most of them are like, I'm convinced I have ADHD. And a lot of times it's because they found out their 11-year-old kid or, their young
Oh
child.
yeah.
And there's a
Yeah.
strong genetic component, but they've never
Yeah.
gone through the assessment. And I think
Yeah.
part of this fear, like, is this going to take a long time? Like, what is this like? I'm a busy person. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience with going through assessment was like?
Sure. So I was recommended to reach out to, and I'm just gonna dump a ton of information. So if anyone's watching in the New York area, that
I'm gonna,
it's
I
that's
will,
why.
yeah,
See, but I'm part of the Montefiore system, specifically the Albert Einstein. I believe it's the School of Mental Health, and again, I feel like I've landed on my feet. I feel extremely privileged. So I want to get that out there. I feel very, very lucky, Diana, to find help that quickly. But to answer your question succinctly, I went through maybe 2 to 3 online assessments, and these assessments were 20 to 30 pages long, like super deep, super personal, family history, the whole thing. And then 2 calls with a psychiatrist, 2 calls with a therapist. And within, I don't know, the first call with the psychiatrist, she said, I'm also being treated for PTSD, which is a whole different conversation. And she wanted to treat me for that first, which is our first call, and then give it 4 weeks for that treatment to start taking effect. And she didn't want to start me on 2 meds at the same time. So as a first timer medication taker, she wanted to start with that first and see how I dealt with that. And then we moved on to medication for ADHD, and treating ADHD, and life-changing in every way possible. It's
Did it
not
take a long
a
time?
flick of a switch.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Did it take a long time from when your GP first suggested to, like, how long did the
I want to
assessments
say
take?
about a month, Diana. About a
Okay.
month, maybe 6 weeks.
Okay. That
Yeah,
is that it, I
quick
mean,
from what I've heard.
it's quick. It doesn't feel quick when you just want answers, but it's
Yeah,
quick.
that's true. But they were very thorough. 6 weeks does sound short, and I think just from someone from the outside looking into this conversation, and I know people in the UK are on 3 to 4 year waiting list, Diana, just for that assessment.
Yeah.
Years. So 6 weeks absolutely looks like nothing. But you're
Nothing.
right. I was inherently, I've always been curious, and that's one of the things that I always been curious my entire life, and that's one of the, can we call them traits? One of the personality traits of someone who has ADHD is innate curiosity.
Yeah.
Even as an introvert, just innate curiosity. Like, I used to get called nosy all the time. but I was never bouncing off the walls at school. I was the kid that would, start looking out the window. Oh, look, there's a woodpecker, or just
That sounds a lot
daydream and
like,
drift.
it sounds like you may have gotten missed the way a lot of girls get missed, girls and women,
So I've heard. Yeah,
with
yeah,
ADHD, because
yeah.
the whole I follow some creators on like YouTube, TikTok, like
Hmm.
wherever I find them, because this
Yeah,
is kind of my thing I'm curious about right now that I really want to dig into.
yeah.
And the description that I heard a woman with ADHD say is that it's like I have control of my body, but not my brain. So no
Hmm.
one ever knew. And it was a woman that found out, like in her 30s and 40s, something like
Yeah,
that. She had ADHD. So
yeah. I follow a ton of women on LinkedIn who specialize in ADHD for women. It's fascinating. Very different.
it's very fascinating.
Yeah,
And there's simply not enough people. There's just not enough people. There's so much ADHD and also autism. Like those are both, we're
yeah,
identifying them, and
yeah,
people are not being quiet about those diagnoses anymore because it
yeah,
has less of a stigma than it used to have.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
me, I feel obligated to learn a little bit more because there's only so many David Hannans out there that can coach. Like the rest of us coaches, I think, need to understand at least minimal stuff so that
right.
we can help people.
Yeah,
There's too much emphasis on like rigor around like get yourself organized and do all these things. I'm like, I know. Like I supervised a guy. I was a people manager in software QA testing for several years, and one of my clients had ADHD and
hmm,
did not want to disclose it to anybody above me. So like the company didn't know, I knew, and maybe a couple of his friends,
hmm.
but it was a challenge to figure out and learn, but he taught me quite a bit about it. So, um
Yeah,
your
many
recruiting
layers.
experience, how did
Mhm.
how do you feel like your ADHD became, you talk about it being your brilliance, honestly. That's part of your branding now, is that your ADHD is your brilliance.
Yeah.
How do you feel like your brilliance showed through in recruiting and now in coaching? And I promise we're going to get into what we're going to help job seekers with, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess
yeah, of course.
real curious
I think
about,
this is, but I think this is relevant too. I
yeah,
do, just from a human perspective. Yeah, for sure. And I love the direction that you've gone in. Um, oh, two reasons. Two reasons. Pattern recognition.
mm,
I've always been good with puzzles, um, match games. You've probably seen those electronic games that are sat like at the end of the bar, and you put a
yeah,
quarter in or you put a dollar in, and you get two pictures, and one is like spot the difference, right? I nail those
same,
every single time. Um, so pattern recognition in recruiting, and for those that don't understand what full desk means, I was a full desk recruiter, which meant I dealt with the candidates directly and the hiring clients directly. So I ran the entire desk. So I was very good. Uh, was very good at getting a job description, even from a first-time client, because I niched in executive and personal assistants at C-level for most of my career. So I had a deep gist of what that role entails. So I'd get a job order from a specific client. I'd meet all my clients face to face. Client visits were actually pretty fun, and then I'd match the candidate. So pattern recognition, I would know instantly. I would, people say 3 seconds, arbitrary 5 to 7 seconds, let's say, I would have a decent gut check, yes, no,
yeah,
on a resume. And I don't think a lot of people talk about this enough. And I don't think job seekers hear it enough, because it's not easy to hear that, their livelihood or their candidacy can be, you know, cut in 5 seconds, given the amount of time they've probably spent on the resume.
yeah.
Um,
It's weirdly
so
easier for them. It's weirdly harder for them to hear that than it is to believe things that aren't even true about
because
the
they want
age.
it to be different. Yeah, they want it to be about, and I
They,
and I say this from a former candidate too.
yeah,
I haven't always been a recruiter. So, I've seen how, again, it's going to sound like a blanket statement, but it applies for the majority. And that's how most agency recruiters work. We work closest to the deal. I was talking to a client yesterday. The biggest difference between what I do now and what I did then, back then, my role was, find a round peg for my round hole. That's it.
Mhm.
Speed, right? The name of the game in agency recruiting was speed. And yes to efficiency in parentheses, but it was speed. So pattern recognition back then, I look back and I'm like, holy shit, that's probably why I was good at it. I was really good at matching. And I was really good at matching in the inverse. So I was very good at saying no. So my hit rate, my placement rate was pretty high, or at least my interview rate was one of the highest in both firms that I worked at.
Nice.
So in pattern recognition, and then I don't know if there's a name for it, like multitasking. And again, it's like you think multitasking in ADHD, you think, really? And we were talking about Ringling Brothers before we went live, and I always, one of the things that I used to love about the circus when I was a kid with the clowns, and they'd put plates on sticks, right?
Mhm.
So that's how I looked at my recruiting job. I'd get a job order and, a top list of candidates, and that would be a plate on a stick. So I could spin multiple plates, all at different levels, or how far they were in the process, all different levels or stages of the process, multiple times without even a CRM.
Yeah.
Without even a CRM.
That's impressive because,
I didn't have a CRM. Yeah, when I worked at Career Group, they never had a CRM. Believe it or not, and they moved to, I don't know what they moved to after I left, but shortly after I left, they moved to a really good CRM, and they still use it, I believe. And then Green Key, right when I left, they were implementing Salesforce. Before that were two systems that were separate for contract and one for perm. Those systems couldn't talk to each other. It's just, so a lot of manual, a lot of written notes, a lot of
Yeah.
spreadsheets. So
Post-it
to
notes on the
answer your
desk,
question,
you know
yeah,
exactly which
pattern
ones.
recognition and just the ability to not get stressed. It's I say it in my brain, I'm like, but it sounds counterintuitive, or it sounds like I'm BSing. I
No,
can't
I
explain it.
understand this because when I told you I was managing that gentleman, whose name was Jonathan, on
Mhm.
my software, I had a team of QA testers, and then I had a team of business analysts added. At one point, I had 12
Yeah.
people, and a lot of them were very focused individuals. But I had
Mhm.
him, and then later on, there was another person on my team that also had ADHD.
Yeah.
And I don't know that he knew. I don't know that the second person knew, but I had learned enough from just being in management for several years to figure out,
Mhm.
like, it's like parenting. You only have one child, and I don't have any, but I have a lot of nieces and several nieces and nephews, and you just can't treat everybody the same. Like, that's just not how
Mhm.
the world works. So
Yeah.
I worked differently with the people that had ADHD because I was just trying to respond to needs. I knew fuck all about ADHD, but I knew that their brains worked different. And I was in the gifted program. So my brain always worked different in another way. And I
Mhm.
had people that were peer managers. I'm in software. There's like the tech support manager and the software engineering manager and my director are like, why are these people not working the same way? Why are you not making them work the same way?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
giving them an outcome, and we do have a process to follow, but some people would rather have one big project that they were responsible for. These people wanted like a medium-sized project or one big project, but I had to give them like little ones. If they didn't
Yeah.
have 5 bugs that they were also responsible for testing for that release,
Yeah.
they would go crazy because they needed to take their brain to another problem. And
Right.
then, of course, the answer from the first problem would sometimes come to them while they're working on a totally unrelated second problem. So it might not make sense to other people, but it
Mhm.
makes sense to me based on some people that I've worked with. And when I've coached in the past, again, not knowing some of the tips and tricks we're about to get into, I figured out I can't ask my people to just focus on doing one thing one way. So why don't we just go
Yeah.
there?
I think it was a case of, again, my knowledge of ADHD is mostly personal and it's wholly anecdotal.
That's
But
okay.
if I was, gun to head, I'd say uh, novelty craving.
Mm,
The multiple plates, like, and because I was pretty decent at interview, getting a candidate an interview, especially a candidate that really wanted to work with me. That's like a relationship thing, which, I don't think is also covered enough. If anyone out there is looking for work, good recruiters really, really want to work with you. They do. Please treat them nicely. The good ones. They really want to work for you and work really hard. And yes, they want to make the fee, but they also want to treat you well. So the novelty craving, but the dopamine hits. Now, I knew what dopamine was before my diagnosis. We all do, but I really didn't understand it's the fuel for motivation for me. I'm just going to say me. I don't want to blanket this for everybody because everybody has different stages of ADHD and they overlap with autism. And it's a massive conversation that I'm not qualified to have. But for me, looking back, I'm like, shit, all those interviews that I got, or just, we used to call it a bite on a resume. So you send a resume to a client that say, hey, get me their availability. We call that a bite. Right. Even getting a bite on a candidate resume was like a tiny rush, a micro dose of dopamine. I didn't know what it was back then. It just felt good, right?
Yeah.
So that fed the motivation, because I had no motivation. Because if you told me that I needed to make 20 cold calls that day to brand new clients for biz dev, my body would find a way to not do it. And if anyone's listening with ADHD, you know exactly what that means. I don't know how to explain it. I physically was stuck.
Yeah.
So the whole push through it, just do it, doesn't work. And again, for myself, doesn't work for my brain. I can't just do it. I have mechanisms now through CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, some tools that are in my arsenal that if I'm quick enough to catch something, then I'll go through some stages that I've worked on myself, like splashing cold water on my face, like something as dumb as that. But it's got to be in the moment. Otherwise, it's
you can't put it on your to-do list and do it 3 tasks later because you will have lost your to-do list.
Well, my to-do lists all have alarms, Diana. So
yeah,
my to-do list every day is about 17 alarms. 17. And they are from I'm sorry to go off topic. Thank you for letting me flow. They go from, did you eat lunch, to picking up my daughter at 5 o'clock. Now I know she's at daycare because I dropped her off this morning, but I need something at 5 o'clock to pull me out, an audible alert to pull me out of whatever I might be in. Client project, a Zoom call with a friend, grocery shopping. I work from home, so I've got to try and fit in around my clients stuff that I can. But yeah, work comes first when I work from home. So yeah, it's someone asked me that on another podcast 3-4 months ago. What would you say an ideal job is for someone with ADHD? I'm like, recruiting, man. Agency recruiting, full desk.
And there's a lot of people I know a lot
There's
of
so many other jobs
have various different jobs in this online space that for the same reasons it's good for them. Some of them will have deliverable. The ones that I think struggle the most are the ones that are doing true services work. I'm your website designer and this website is due Friday. They struggle with someone that has a community with 300 members that's $50 a month, and they have only a few things to remember to do at a certain time. I want to turn now to kind of what we promised people was we were going to give some tips to people with ADHD.
Only took us half an hour, right?
I'll be the person without ADHD that gets us to the next thing on the list.
Thank you, Diana. You're my accountability partner.
I will be your accountability partner any day.
I appreciate that. Even I need one.
You're a great we're having a podcast. This is not a CSI investigation, light bulbs in our face trying to figure out who committed the murder. We're just talking about stuff. But I think a lot of people throw the word clarity around. When I first started in this online business, I was like, that's a great word. No one's talking about it. It turns out everybody is talking about it. I just didn't know at the time because I was new. Yeah. Clarity, we talk a lot about clarity being important in a job search, but I think where we sometimes fail in general, whether someone is neurospicy or not, is not really saying what that means. And often it gets reduced to, you just need to know what kind of job title and industry you're going for. That's not unimportant, but can you tell us a little bit about what clarity means to you for a job search and how you might have to approach it differently for someone with ADHD? I have some observations, but I want to bump them up against what you've seen because you have more clients in this space.
Yeah, great question. Clarity has always been something that I've worked on as part of my coaching offering with
Same.
clients for almost 4 years now. And it's always been there. And I am glad you raised the additional point. Like, this is not just about getting really clear on the direction you want to head in. Isn't an ADHD thing. It's an everybody thing. And I did it myself in 2013 and then again in 2018 when I was between Career Group and Green Key. I knew what I was good at. Knew I was a good recruiter. Knew I could make deals and you could get a ton of interviews for my candidates. I was professional. I was polished. I wore a suit. I was good at that job. But I never loved it, Diana. But I did it. And I did it because, again, spinny plates, dopamine, cha-ching, because I made quite a bit of money as an agency recruiter. I worked for 2 really excellent companies that paid, way above market for perm recruiting on commission. So very lucky. So for me, it was about helping others, not just clients, but just everyone that I could kind of hope to reach on LinkedIn, about getting really clear on what you want to do next. And I think there are a couple of things that I've seen and that I recognize even today when I speak to brand new prospective clients. And it's a lot of the time, a lot of them are afraid to say the quiet things out loud, and the quiet things being what they've always wanted to do. But they either feel, and there's like a list, right? It's like an arbitrary list. I'm too far gone. It's too late. A lot of clients that I work with are 40s and above. I work with
stop you for
all ages, but
I want to stop you for a second and tell a story about that. So about 2 years ago, I was down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. One of my friends has surgery, but it just so happened my auntie that lives down there had her 85th birthday. So I went to this birthday party, tons of cousins and whatnot there. And one of my cousins and his new wife, who I'd only met twice, was there. She was really curious about the work I do and asked me, tell me about this. She asked me at one point, what's the hardest thing about the career coaching job? And I said, without question, it's getting people to recognize that it's okay to want what they want and to say it out loud. Because it's like they will either not know, so we have to work on getting them to know, or they won't want to say it out loud because they think they don't deserve it, because we've heard all these dumb messages like if work was supposed to be fun, they wouldn't call it work, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I just had to jump in and share that story because to me, it's the most succinct explanation of what is the hardest about our job. So continue.
Thank you. I appreciate the interjection. Happy birthday to, you said it was your nan, your grandma? Your aunt, sorry.
My mom is
your auntie.
85.
Yeah. Good on her. Good years. You mentioned just something just then, and I wrote it down, that they don't know what they want to do. We might have different views on this, and that's cool. I think we should all have different opinions, and I'm sure we agree on a lot of stuff too. But I would say about 7 out of 10 times, every single person that I end up working with, and sometimes we uncover it in my chemistry calls. Chemistry call is basically a discovery call, but we go super deep. And a lot of people I speak to, Diana, actually know what they want to do. They've just buried it so deeply. Yeah. And now, especially because all of my clients have ADHD or suspect they have it on a pre-treatment, pre-diagnosis. But, we have conversations about that super delicately. I try and create safe spaces for, anonymity. And, when job seekers come to me anyway, they're not usually in their proudest moment. Now, add on a layer of neurodivergence, and it's just, it's a really delicate place. And I think another one of my strengths, given my recruiting background, I take candidate / job seeker anonymity first and foremost. It's super important. So about 7 out of 10 people that I speak to, Diana, actually, with some digging, actually know what they really want to do. They're just too afraid to say it because they're afraid of getting more disappointed in that, just pushing that vision away. And it's kind of like, it's far enough away that they feel safe not to like, okay, that's what I really want to do. And I know I'll never touch it, but I still want to kind of have a faded glimpse of it so I know it exists, right? Like it's something.
What I was going to ask you is when they are afraid, is it because they don't believe it exists? Is it because
No, they
they
know it exists. It's
get
usually
it?
something they've applied to and just applied to and applied to and applied
They
to
can't
and
get it.
been ghosted or rejected so many times that they're like, F it.
Okay.
What's the point? Or I've had
Why?
some people cry on these chemistry. I'm not even joking. I'm not doing this for like drama. I've had people cry on these chemistry calls, like towards the end. Like, people aren't coming on bawling their eyes out, but it's like towards the end when we start digging down and like, what does this mean? What have you always wanted to do? What's stopping you? You know, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you really want to do tomorrow? Like things like that. What did you want to be when you were a kid? That usually gets
Mhm.
things really going. And I
Yeah.
always include my Air Force as a kid
Story.
for context. Yeah. And it's, for me, I think coaching is, I feel obligated as a coach to help people open up to me. It's whatever they want to say outside of our call or coaching sessions is entirely up to them. But really good work comes from them and I getting to eye level really, really quick. And I
Mhm.
find that helps when I share first, right?
Yeah.
You
I
know,
I do too, and it's funny because there's so many people that have drunk like the ICF Kool-Aid, where you
mm,
only ever ask questions, you share limited amounts about yourself, all the
it's one
questions.
of the reasons why I'm not certified yet. But
I
it's,
have I've
yeah,
been back and forth on all
yeah.
of that. I have one of my friends,
I
I
see
don't know.
the value in that. Just thinking, I don't want to like put noses out of joint. I see the value in that. I just want to add that also, but
Yeah,
not for
I
me
get
right
it.
now.
I haven't done it, and there's some spaces that I'm getting drawn into where it would be a benefit, so I'm trying to figure
Yeah.
out, like, should I do that? How can I do this in a way
Sure.
that actually works for me? But going back to clarity, so you're saying your people know, but they
Most of
just
them.
not been successful 7 out of 10 times. So what
They've
is
given up. They've
they
given up, Diana. They've
so
given
they
up wanting to try anymore. Yeah.
they
They
they've
want, it's more about validation. It's more about validation than anything else. Like typically a lot of people I speak to already know what they want to do. They've either been rejected for that one thing too often, or now, the last 8 months have been now focused on ADHD professionals only. So that go it and I used to do this myself. And I'm very good at it. I'm really good at Boolean strings. I'm really good at searching for jobs, Diana.
Mhm.
Really good.
Yes.
My Boolean game
I work
is up
mostly
there.
I work
So I
mostly
could go and I could sit on LinkedIn and Career Builder and like pull off really, really close jobs. And then apply to like L&D, internal recruiting, blah, 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 blah. But guess what? Ghosted. Ghosted. You know why? I didn't know how to position myself. And I was kind of found myself still, even though I was like super targeted, I was kind of going wide. I was multiple jobs, right? And guess what? When your resume lands on other recruiters' inboxes for 3 different jobs and it's the same recruiter, you start signaling to other people that you probably going wide, and does that guy even know what he wants? So
yeah.
over time, I'm just getting rejected. And not even like, thanks, we'll call you, just silence. And after a while, it's like, why even bother? So then I'd apply to recruiting jobs, think dopamine, apply to recruiting jobs, knowing I have a greater chance of getting an interview. But then guess what happens? I get the interview and then I don't want to go.
Mm. And if you don't want to go, you're not going. So how do you turn this cycle for people? So when someone has been so demoralized by
Yeah.
this, they know either exactly or close to exactly what they want. They've been
Yep.
demoralized by the process. And if they try to go for second best, like it's just not going to happen. They're not going to be motivated to do the work or show up. How do you flip that script for people? What is your process to get them from that kind of sad and believer point into being successful in a
Yeah.
strategy that works for them?
Great question. So quickly, because I know we don't have all afternoon and I want to talk about a lot of things that you've got on the agenda. I have a pretty powerful, accurate system that I've used for about 2 years that draws from Clifton Strengths and SWOT, believe it or not, a simple SWOT. It's personal. It's the questions are the same, right? But the prompts that I ask my clients to kind of dive into a little bit more personal. And I draw from all that data, past resumes. I even transcribe with their permission, obviously. They know that our meetings are being transcribed. So from early emails to chemistry core transcriptions, SWOT, and Clifton 34, I have a system that builds out a trajectory, I call a career path report. And this career path report builds 2 potential futures for them. And it's based on things that they've already wanted and already discussed with me.
Very cool.
And yeah, and it's, I mean, I haven't run, I'm going to write this down, but I haven't run like the efficacy of this, but I've worked with maybe 100 clients with this process, and it's been way more fine-tuned recently, but I haven't missed the mark on any one of those clients. It's been that close to what they actually want to do. You mentioned before, you said, and just to quote you, second best, I call it dream adjacent. People throw out the word dream job all the time. I don't think it exists. It's exhausting to even, for me as someone with ADHD, chasing a dream means chasing perfection, right? And that, we all know where that can lead, right? So we don't need to talk about that. But yeah. I've talked about this in a newsletter recently, and I try and talk about it as often as I can, but I like the phrase dream adjacent. For example, and I used to do this when I was a recruiter. So let's say I had an executive assistant who worked in finance. She worked in the hedge fund space, hated finance, wanted to work in HR, but in fashion. I'm like, that is a big ass leap, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would have conversations, say, okay, so how can we distill your dreams into something that is relevant, that's going to resonate with them? Because we need to meet them halfway. Would you be open to a potential executive assistant to head of HR at a fashion house? Like, how can we get you in so you can then maneuver? And 9 times out of 10, they'll be like, yeah, I'd be open to that conversation. Dream adjacent. So if I can get my clients as close as possible to where they can then find footing and like really accelerate through their own efforts, because Dinah, we work with some incredible people. They've all got it in them.
Yeah.
It's about getting them as close as possible and then just like handing it off and saying, look, this is probably the closest we can get. So I like the phrase dream adjacent.
I explain it.
Pressure off too.
I like dream adjacent. Thank you for giving me that. I won't
take some pressure off. Yeah.
Completely stealing that from you.
Steal it.
The thing I love about that is it's very close to the way I've talked to people about that. I say like your ideal may be, I say ideal a lot instead of dream, but your ideal job may be 2 or 3 hops from where you're at now.
Yeah.
Even not counting promotion.
Exactly right, Diana.
Yeah. Industry or role or whatever department that you're working in. And so I say it's really hard to do more than 1 hop at a time. So you're talking like 2 major hops, role and industry. Let's do 1 hop and then go from there. It's brilliant. A lot of people really get demoralized because they are trying to boil the ocean. And it's like,
no.
Instead of eating the elephant. So once you kind of get them to where, all right, now we see here's a path, here's a dream adjacent job. So maybe someday you can be closer to the dream. What are strategies, that actually work to execute the search? The searches right now feel like a long, dark slog for a lot of people. And there's a certain amount of just perseverance that's involved. So how do you help people? What looks different about a strategy for one of your clients than maybe some of the recommendations we hear and read and maybe have coached to in the past, so they can actually do the damn thing?
Yeah. Most people who come to me, and I'm sure people that you speak to on a daily basis, are really good at applying to jobs on the boards, LinkedIn, Career Builder, Monster, yada, yada. And really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you probably know,
hitting apply.
I'm sorry?
Hitting apply is dopamine. Saying that I completed things
Correct.
Is dopamine. So
exactly. That dopamine also comes from some false expectations or wonky expectations that you're going to get something in return, like you're expecting a result.
Yeah.
So those dopamine hits, yeah, they can have a negative effect when you don't start getting them. Anyway, you're right. The majority of people that I meet are doing a really good job of applying to jobs. They've got a halfway decent resume. I met a prospective client yesterday whose resume was actually pretty good. And I said to them, did a really good job. So some have like got it together. They've either taken advice off LinkedIn or they've used a resume coach before coming to me. So they're applying effectively. But what tends to happen is they will start out focused. Irony. They'll start out with a mission, right? It's like, I want to do that. And I'm going to have my resume. I'm going to either use whatever services to get it done. And the resume will be half decent, enough for it to make sense, right? So they'll start applying to jobs. And with every job, like riding a bike, you're going to fall off and graze a knee. With applications, you're going to get, I don't know, 1%, 5% response, if you get a response. After a while, you start downing yourself, especially with an ADHD brain, because you're going to mountain out of a molehill. They don't like me. My resume's crap, like whatever it may be. They've seen my LinkedIn, right? It's like you can spiral pretty quickly. So after a while, they'll start going wide, thinking wider is better, right? A wider net, more fish. And typically what they end up catching are crickets, because the wider you go, the less response you're going to get, because that just from one piece of that metric, application to response ratio, you've now multiplied it by 10. So your ghosting ratio is multiplied by 10, right? Just from an amplification perspective. But now if your resume, and I know this because it used to happen with me, and now if your resume is landing on the same recruiter's desk and they're running 3 different searches for 3 different clients with 3 different roles, because that happens, that recruiter's going to start thinking, what's this guy Dave even want?
Yeah.
So next time they see my resume, especially if they have ADHD, don't forget pattern recognition. They see my resume for a 4th time, they might not even open it, Dinah, because they make the assumption that this guy doesn't know what he wants this time. So you start running into the risk of thinning out your impact. So I have this crazy concept that I call the 1 path principle, and it terrifies a lot of people. It's on my website. I explain it there in like 1 paragraph. It's nothing magical, but it's about reframing what a job search should be based on certain factors within a job search journey that we can't change, i.e. your LinkedIn profile, right? So long story short, you're applying to 3 to 5 different types of jobs. 3 to 5 different recruiters get your resume and go, oh my God, yeah. Guess where they're going next? Your LinkedIn profile. Your LinkedIn profile is saying one thing, if you're lucky, right? If you've done your LinkedIn profile well and you've optimized it well, it usually says one thing, right? So now you've got potentially four conflicting stories, right?
Yeah.
And I can tell you from personal experience, I don't know if anyone's listening who's in the recruiting game or been recruiting, you've been a hiring manager, you know this, and you're a coach. Nothing repels a recruiter quicker than confusion. So if I was confused or I wasn't like, what?
It's like marketing.
It's going to sound harsh, but Diana, like people need to hear this harsh reality that I think a lot of people don't want to say. And I'm not saying this because I disrespected them. How could they? I didn't know them. So it was never personal. It was a business decision. It was remember I talked about earlier, speed. My job was speed, round peg, round hole. So if I was confused or just unsure even about the relevance of that resume, not the person, the resume.
500 more that you can pick from. So why am I going to spend time?
They're a closed browser tab.
Yeah.
That's it. Click, done. Without even a feeling. It's just part of my job. Like picking tomatoes or
no HR department is ever going to let their recruiters say, you're not moving forward. Thanks for your application. You're not moving forward because when I clicked from your resume to your LinkedIn, I was confused. They're never going to say that.
I never responded to one email in 16 years saying, did you mean this? Not once.
No. Yeah.
I don't have time. It sounds almost me. I almost cringe inside me saying these out loud because I know how this lands with some people when they've been looking for so long. I was out of work for 11 months in 2013, Diana, longest in my entire life. I know how rejection feels. I know how ghosting feels even worse. But yeah, it's an unfortunate truth that I don't think a lot of people talk about enough in the recruiting space. Like, they should like be open. Candidates are the grown adults. Like, start treating them like them. Tell them the truth. It might sting, but it's way more temporary than like hanging on hope that's never going to happen, right? So
Yeah.
to your point, how do I get them through that? I call it my one path principle. And it's essentially creating this granular strategy where they can still apply, because once we've moved on from clarity to resume, they now have a master version that they can use to apply. I have tools that they get after we've closed out resume, so they can tweak that resume accordingly. They can recontextualize bullet points. They can create different metrics based on what kind of job they're applying to, right? But they stay inside the lines. And that can be terrifying for a lot of people. I get every single client through it. Some take longer than others. I had one client go through clarity in like 3 days. And I had one client take, are you ready for this? 7 weeks. 7 weeks. Hard, because it requires you letting go of old, bought into habits. It's the hardest part. But from there, Diana, to answer your question, from that comes confidence. And I've said this so many times, job search is not a skills game. It's a confidence game. It's a game of confidence. And that confidence comes from knowing where you're going.
And I'll tell you, I'll say one other thing, because I say this about entrepreneurship too. Mm-hmm. There is no bigger boss move in job search or entrepreneurship than saying no to things that are not for you. So like withdrawing from an interview process when you figure out, oh my gosh, this shit show, or this is actually, I talked to the recruiter about this, but now that I'm talking to the hiring manager, it actually is completely different. Like withdrawing from those things when you figure out they're not for you is a big boss move. And I often say to my clients, like something I have focused on, it sounds like you and I are doing this in different ways, is being really selective on where you apply. The people that are landing the fastest, and definitely the people that are landing the happiest, apply the fewest places.
Correct.
Because they are figuring out what they want. And then they're also doing more relationship building things and whatnot.
Yep.
The proverbial get the job through the network, which is also not understood. We could rant about that on another episode of the show. But so
let's do another episode on that alone.
Yeah, you're doing, you're basically saying, we're putting you on a path, not a skinny line, but not a super wide one. It has guardrails, and I'm going to tell you how to jump over the puddles whenever you're like, oh, I kind of want this. The way I look at it is when I have people that have a diversity of roles they're interested in, I'm very good at finding a common thread too. So that pattern recognition thing you and I both have in common. And so often it's about what problems they want to solve. The laziest thing that people say is I like to solve problems. Like literally that's table stakes. It's like showing up on time and taking a shower before you come to work. Like you have to do those things. But when you can dig in and figure out what problems someone is a genius at solving, that's how you can find the throughway and the different paths. I just spoke to a woman via DMs on LinkedIn. Another one of my prior clients had referred to me like, hey, you're good. She said, you're a good person to follow. I'm not really shopping for a coach, but I'm in this situation. And the person has a psychology degree and had worked in clinical environments, I think she'd worked in clinical environments, but basically she's like, I don't know even what to type in as a job title. So I suggested to her, think a lot about what problems you like to solve and that you're excellent at solving, and a couple of other things. I'm like, go ask ChatGPT what jobs do that. Put your resume in, put where you're a genius at, and ask it for 5 job titles, and then go further research. And from there, you can start to narrow down. It's one of my favorite uses of AI is to help. I can do that, but honestly, if I'm stumped because I don't know the industry, what am I going to do? Same thing. I'm going to go take their same stuff and put it in to my AI tool of choice and come out with it. We're getting close-ish to the end of time. One more, I have a little lightning round list, but before I ask you that, I wanted to ask you, how can ADHD job candidates advocate for themselves without jeopardizing the opportunities? So it can be so strange and weird because the brain works differently. What are some ways that they can honor their brain and maybe ask for something if they need it, even if it's just clarity? When should I follow up with you? Without worrying that they're going to jeopardize their candidacy.
Oh, you mean from a job search
Yeah,
perspective, like they're in
their perspective.
process, like they've had an interview and it's like, it's been 2
Interacting
weeks.
with people. I'm getting at the job seeker
Yeah.
taking control of how they interact with people in a way that
Oh
honors them
God.
instead of
Yeah.
just trying to fit in the be the square peg in the round hole. Are there any
Yeah.
suggestions
Yeah.
you have for that?
Yeah. Yeah. And it comes from repetition. So I'll answer your question definitively. Um, it goes back to clarity, Diana, and I don't want to beat that dead horse, but a lot of what you and I both work in, and I'll speak from my own behalf because it's really a deep part of my clarity phase, is the reason we lean into something so granular and definitive is because, as you mentioned, it's so much easier to say no to things that don't match what you want to do anymore. So you can push a lot of things away, which reduces ghosting, rejection, right? Just from a math perspective, right?
Got it.
But as far as um, I'll tell you what I would do if I was like, you know what, I'm done with coaching, Diana. Later, I'm going to go and work L&D in corporate America, back on the Metro North to New York City, right?
Mhm.
So what I would do is embed myself with, this is obviously from a research perspective. I would use ChatGPT, I'd use LinkedIn search. And like I said, I'm really good at Boolean. I would find other communities, people, content creators specifically who focus on neurodivergence or specifically ADHD. And if I really want to get granular, inattentive type, right? Which is
Mhm.
ADHD PI, predominantly inattentive. And I would learn and I would glean some confidence from what other people have shared, their stories, and so on and so forth. So again, it's a confidence game, Diana, and wherever you can get that confidence from, it has to be based on something that you've done, right? You can't give someone confidence. It sounds like lip service, and
It makes a lot of
100%
sense.
of job seekers are smart people. Like they know what needs to be done. But with ADHD, it's just hard to do something when we're not interested in it. And that not interested thing could be more rejection, right?
Got it.
Like I don't want that
Makes a
anymore.
lot of
So why
sense.
bother?
Basically, you're saying immerse yourself in information and community related to something that you're interested in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
by doing that, you'll feel equipped with knowledge. And then
Yeah.
also, especially for people that are more relational, they'll thrive on, and I met people, even if it's a buddy in the comments, like you and I were for 4 years,
Yep. Yep.
that will carry them through and make things easier.
Yep.
And then they're not
Yep.
distracting themselves applying to crap that they
On
shouldn't be.
meaningless shit. Exactly. And it's something that I've really enjoyed helping current clients when they've been okayed with it is when we get to phase 3, which is connection. I teach my clients how to network properly. Is doing super deep research. So I use Perplexity for this. So if anyone's watching, perplexity.ai is amazing from a research. But ChatGPT can do everything too, but I use Perplexity because I don't know, habit maybe, right?
It doesn't.
So I will actually research companies that publicly advocate for neurodivergence. I will.
Okay.
And it's like, there's this like meeting at eye level moment, Diana. So like when I meet someone who's reaching out, inquiring about my services, and we talk about ADHD, the wall comes down immediately, immediately. And it's the same thing when you identify a company that shares their neurodivergent principles or how they really celebrate accommodations that they, do you know what I'm saying? Like if you can find, again, we're kind of like going down a single digit sometimes, maybe for when people are looking for an actual company they want to work at. But you can find that again, it's an air of confidence. So if you find companies that can celebrate the way your brain works, for one of a better phrase, it's a massive confidence boost. And I just again, it's like it takes the pressure off.
I really love that you said that. It reminds me that there's a creator named Grace McCarrick that I originally found on TikTok. She's also on LinkedIn and I'm sure other places, but she is focused on teaching soft skills to professionals, of all ages. When I first saw her, she talked more about teaching Gen Z, but she
Yeah.
talks about all of it. And I saw this video on TikTok just last night where someone had, posted a comment that she was responding to that said, basically, you're just kind of like a shill, or you're constantly defending corporate and that kind of thing. And she responded and said, look, y'all are coming at that from the perspective with this idea that I'm advocating for these unethical companies. If you go and look at my website page and see what logos I'm working with, those are companies that actually care. So if you don't like where you're at, go look at that and research companies like that. And that's where you need to go work. So don't come at me because you work for somewhere that's not interested in this. Go find somewhere that's interested in developing you. And I think that's a really powerful concept.
You can literally write that into Perplexity for free. Give me a list of New York City-based firms that have neurodivergent programs publicly, and boom, 5 seconds, lists, links.
Yes.
Done.
You can go.
Done. But ultimately, Dan, I think it comes down to relatability and unmasking. One of the biggest. When I can unmask with someone, for example, when I meet someone else who's, I'll use your phrase because I like it, neurospicy. They think differently. We walk around with masks on. I walked around with a mask for 52 years. And I only over the last 6 months that I've felt confident enough to unmask. But I've got to tell you, when I meet a prospective client now who has ADHD or suspected ADHD, I've never felt this way before. And I really, really mean this. And I say it in my calls with them. It's so easy for me to feel like I can be myself in front of them. And it makes everything feel relatable. All the guards come down. We meet at eye level super quickly, and it just feels safe. And I think that safe space thing has been thrown around for the right reasons and also the wrong reasons, just, to create, viral engagement. But I feel safe. I feel safe when I talk to people who come to me for help, who are also struggling with the limitations of what ADHD imposes on their daily routine, job search, or just life in general. Do you know how many parents I meet? You know how many parents I meet who have ADHD? Parents. Oh my God. So yeah, a lot of us, I've met a lot of people who were late stage diagnoses, and it's based on they either saw some traits in their kid, or like me, I thought I had a mad anger issue, that I was just an angry Joe, that I was like, rage, red mist guy. Turns out I was emotionally dysregulated, part of the ADHD subset of struggles. Yeah. I've always wrestled with my moods, and now I know one of the reasons why it could be happening. I can treat it. I can learn coping mechanisms. So yeah, relatability. So yeah, find your crew, find people that can relate to you.
I like that
they're out there.
Approaching your coaches more like your clients more like peers. I think that there's
most of these people just want to feel validated.
Yes.
That's what they're looking for. Forget job search. I'm telling you, like, this is bonkers for me to say this on a job search themed podcast. People just want to relate to another person that understands what they're struggling with in and out of the resume send. Because at the end of the day, we're people before we're job seekers. And this goes much deeper than just sending resumes and making sure your LinkedIn looks pretty. It's like deep shit. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm swearing.
No, we're a PG-13 rated
show. I don't usually curse. Sorry.
I do. So I want to feel like
I'm such a grown-up. Yeah.
Huh?
I felt like such a grown-up saying shit. I did it again.
I said fuck earlier, and I'd say it again.
I know you did. Yeah, I'm not going there.
I don't do it all the time, but yeah. So I'm going to move us into a lightning round, and then we're going to talk about how people can get a hold of you. And your exceptional newsletter. We'll talk a little bit about that before we close.
Thank you.
Lightning round that I often say is not
lightning round. Is there music or anything? Like
there's no music. I'm not fancy.
Go.
No Jeopardy theme.
You're so fancy, Diana. Come on.
I'm very much not fancy. I have an SOP and some VAs that make me look organized. So what is the worst piece of career advice you've ever received, David?
That I've ever received?
Yep. Worst piece.
Apply to as many jobs as you can.
That's a Mic drop right there. I agree.
It's a
Um,
numbers game. It ain't.
oh,
Trust me.
guys.
Take
Yeah,
it from an old boy recruiter. It is not a numbers game. It is a confidence game.
love that. What is a personal habit that helps you be successful?
A personal habit. Okay. It's a two-part answer. Working on my listening skills
Okay.
and my absolute reliance on my alarm. I have an alarm app that I use called Galarm. I don't work with them. I'm not affiliated with them. I use their free version. It's spelled alarm with a G on the front. It's free.
Okay.
I use the
Galarm.com.
iOS version.
Okay.
Alarms for everything. I mean, successful. Successful at what? Remembering to eat,
Your
remembering to go to the bathroom. Yes,
your
success.
definition of successive. For me,
Alarms for everything.
can I tell you my thing that I am terrible about?
Yes.
I am
Yes.
the worst about taking out the trash.
Okay.
I
I love
am
taking out the
so
trash.
bad at
Okay.
it. Well, then you can just come move to Kansas and take out my trash. We can be neighbors. It'll be
Perfect. I
I'll
can't think of a better reason to come to Kansas.
where you eat, and then you can take my trash out, and we'll
I'll
hang
be
out.
the trash guy. I'll be the Kansas trash guy. Done.
But I just end up forgetting, and
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
like, it's super late, and they come early on Wednesdays. I did get it out this week, so that's a win.
Alarms for everything.
What is something that you've changed your mind about recently? Like, and recent, it doesn't have to be yesterday. It can be in the last, like,
Yeah.
year or 2. But what's something you've changed your mind about?
God, that's a good
I stole that from Adam Grant.
one. Oh my God. Can we come
Right?
back to that one?
Yeah, we can come back to it.
That is
I
a
think
really
the
good
next
one.
thing
Never
is
been asked that one before.
common misperception people have about your work as a career coach for the ADHD set.
That my last name is Copperfield. Like this is some kind of like, pay me the dollars and everything's like a magic flip of a switch. No, it's work. It's hard work. It's
Yes.
simple work because I have a framework and structure. I have weekly body doubling calls with my clients on FaceTime like this, like
Oh,
live. So accountability partner, I make sure that you're on your toes, keeps me on my toes. So yeah, this is not easy work. And it's something that I even push back on and say, hey, sure, you don't need a recruiter.
you know what? I think
So,
that's I
because I
I'm
know
gonna
the difference between the two.
I'm occasionally saying you really need to be talking to a recruiter. I'm
Yeah.
more often saying therapist. So I've
Mm,
had a few clients that I've worked with where we
sure.
uncover like if you have a limiting beliefs about money, like I'm not the person to fix that.
Yeah.
Because usually there's something going on from prior in their life that's about that. Okay, did you come up with something you've changed your mind about? Or are you just gonna do pass
Over
on
the
it?
last year, is that because
Yeah,
in
let's
5 years, last year,
let's year or
I
2.
think my health, I think my physical health, Diana, I turned 53 this year. Um, a lot of dominoes have sprung up before me since my diagnosis last August. I mean, it's, we're barely a year later, right? What, 9, 10 months?
Mhm.
I've started to take me more seriously. That makes sense. It's maybe hard to put into words, or what does that even mean? Like what is he even talking about? I think I'd always put myself second best because there was this constant craving for me to be liked by everybody. Another ADHD thing we wrestle with, to be constantly want to be liked. I want to be liked, Diana. I want to fit in. It's why the
Mhm.
mask
The
is
mask.
there. So being able to unmask was scary AF. It still is, but I pushed through it. And if I can add this, my wife sent me a text today. I got a little bit emotional just then. I just composed myself.
Mhm.
We went to a friend's house this weekend. They have 3 girls. We have a girl. It's not our first time there. We went around and, and I was mingling and mingling with people that I'd only met once or twice before, right? And these gaps in between are months apart. I was going around mingling and we had a phenomenal time. Like 5 hours just flew by. And then my wife sent me a text today and said how proud she was of
Aw.
how I was that day, how calm and upbeat and just nice to be around. Like she noticed. So yeah, hearing, or in this case, reading things like that, like I'm working on positive change internally has been, yeah, really important. It feels so very new to me though, Diana. And it's not that I lived a life of self-deprecation, but I never put myself first. And I always assumed that people didn't like me because I was weird, or I was different, or I was introverted, or I was too quiet, or I was too fill in gap here, right? With
You
whatever
got-
negative,
Have
right?
you gotten to the point yet that you realize that your weirdness might be why some people like you?
Possibly, but my weirdness was the fact that I was shit at masking. Think about that. My
Oh, I see.
awkwardness was
Like,
the masking.
got
Yeah.
it.
Because, some people can sense like,
And like
something's off with this guy. Something's off. Like their radar will be like, what? Right? Like me seeing a resume that didn't make sense. What? So I'd meet someone and be like, and I know now how that must have felt for them, because I try and unmask, as uncomfortable as it is a lot of the time still, and it probably always will be. But I look back, I'm like, these guys probably thought like, what's his deal? Why doesn't he feel as authentic as I would have hoped? Right? Like, does he have an agenda? Is he hiding something? Right? Yeah, I was hiding me.
your whole
I
self.
My God. Yeah. So like, living up to other people's expectations was an incredibly exhausting practice for me. Corporate America, I worked for two phenomenal staffing agencies in New York City, very high bars. And, and my clients were billion-dollar hedge funds.
Right.
I come from a small Yorkshire mining town. What? So, having to like, the whole fake it till you make it. It's the worst advice. Maybe I could have given you that. Fake it till you make it. Worst advice I've ever been given.
I
Find a way to unmask. Find a
think
way to be your real self, goofy and all.
I have a different relationship with fake it till you make it, but I think, and I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'll
I
tell
mean,
you
other
what,
good
I
things.
feel like there's a certain degree of masking we all have to do. It's nothing like what you've had to deal with, but I am an Enneagram 8, which is the challenger, like I'm wired to be like a contrarian, looking out for the little guy.
Really, you?
It doesn't
I mean,
play
that with
well.
love, Diana. No, I love your personality. It's probably why we get along so well.
Yeah. And it's funny
Yeah.
how much of it we like just discovered from never having talked like this before. So I want to make sure that we don't go all day. We're a
Yeah.
little
Do we have any questions from anyone, or did
I
anyone DM you?
there were not a lot of people in the comments today. So
Oh,
um
good.
we had some great jobs. We had some of that, but
Yeah,
sometimes they show up a little bit later. I always
good.
go back afterwards because I get lost in the conversation. I always go back
Yeah, yeah,
after
yeah,
answer all the questions if they pop up. Um,
yeah, yeah. And
we-
I'm happy to answer any DMs after the fact too.
yeah,
Just
for
throw that
sure.
in
It's
there.
in here.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say is I like to make sure that everybody knows the best places to find you, the
Mhm.
best thing to connect with you, which I believe right now your biggest thing you're driving people towards is the Imperfectionist newsletter. Do you want to talk about that a bit and how people can
Yeah.
find
Yeah, so I had a newsletter a few years back called Pathfinder, and again, I look back and I say this with love. It was a very broad, dare I say, generic newsletter, job search related, deep, but also kind of surface level stuff too. Like everybody's wondering about
care
the
about
same
that
thing.
one? We care about this one.
No, I know. So then, since my diagnosis last August, I'm like, and I buried my previous newsletter for about a year, and I said to my wife, I'm like, I want to restart my newsletter, but I need that different twist. So I launched it. I want to say 4 months ago, the imperfectionist. And I landed on the imperfectionist because I think it's the imperfection in job search that can reduce a lot of the stress and overwhelm and spiral that a lot of us like just get so bogged down with. And I had this little mindset: if your resume is good enough to ship it. No such thing as a perfect resume. Ship it, ship it. If someone can read it, get your friend to read it, have a colleague read it, ship it. So it's the imperfection in us
Yeah.
that can reveal the real us. And I think it can also, in some way, empower us, right? To be more us.
Gosh.
I know that sounds cliche, but there's no other way for me to put it. Like if you feel what I'm saying resonates, then right? But yeah, it's a newsletter. It drops every Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern time. And I typically cover one of 4 areas, which is part of my core 4 framework, which is runs through clarity, cohesion, connection, and communicate. And I typically talk about one of those 4 pillars, if you will,
You guys,
and go super deep.
I'm going to jump in here and say, I love email. I love sending emails. Like, I have a list. It's not huge. But I'm particular about who gets to be in my inbox.
Yeah, same.
And David is one of only about 4 people in the career space that is currently in my inbox that I read every week. So
that means a lot. Thank you.
ADHD, but I'm learning from him how I can maybe help my clients better.
Yeah.
So
it's deeper job search advice, but it is geared towards those who are struggling for real.
And it's really good stuff. So I think anybody can benefit.
Thank you.
From it. But is it
Thank you.
Go to your LinkedIn features page to get it?
It's on my website, pathfinder.coach. You'll see there's a link there in the header at pathfinder.coach. Or if you already know of me or can find me on LinkedIn, I'm obviously on LinkedIn. And if you scroll down to my features section, there's an image there with where you can sign up for my newsletter if you want. If you don't want, that's okay too. But yeah.
All right.
I enjoy writing, Diana. So reigniting the newsletter was a big fat dopamine rush for me. Yeah. Oh my God, I love writing. So yeah, I just truly want to help people. I want job seekers to feel a little bit less shitty about what they're going through.
Same. Well, on that note, I think we'll close. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. This is amazing. Thank you.